Boy, am I sick and tired of hearing about the debt ceiling. Are you tired of hearing about the debt ceiling as much as I am? Howdy, folks. I'm Dr. Brandon Sullivan, also known as Sully. And if there's, I can make a list of the things, phrases that I just don't ever want to hear again in my entire life. Debt ceiling would certainly be on that list. It seems like every single year or so we go through this charade, this theater, this will they, won't they? Are they going to raise the debt ceiling or not? Most of the time it ends up being uneventful, but sometimes it brings us to the brink of complete disaster. And I, for one, am tired of the whole thing is just completely nonsensical, completely made up, and complete farce. You have two conflicting sets of laws, two conflicting instructions coming from Congress to the executive on what to do. One says, hey, we want you to go and spend this amount of money on this stuff. Here's what money you have to do these things. And then the other is saying, yeah, but don't go out and get the money that you need to do the things that we told you to do in the first place. Does that make any sense to you? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Just the ridiculous of having just a conversation about paying the bills for money that's already been spent. I mean, imagine that you're a family. Now, these comparisons of a family or a personal budget versus a government budget, a national budget, are fraught with challenges, limitations. They're not directly comparable, although there are some similarities. But I hear these kind of comparisons all the time. People like these comparisons, so let's just go with it. So imagine you're a family and you are trying to balance the budget. We can't talk about actually bringing in more money. That's off the table for some reason. But put that aside, we're talking about cutting every little thing out of the budget that we possibly can. We'll get rid of the phones. Never mind, we need the phones to communicate with people, but I'll get rid of the phones. We get rid of the internet. We'll need the internet to do our jobs, but we'll get rid of that too. We'll get rid of the internet. Okay, we'll get rid of all of the kids' activities. We'll get rid of all of our activities. We'll get rid of any type of entertainment that we have. We'll get rid of all discretionary spending, but that's not enough. We can't do it with that. Okay, so now let's get rid of all of the food. We'll just get it down to the absolute bare minimums. We're going to have just bread and water to eat. So we get rid of all the grocery. Strip that all out. Oh, that still, though, doesn't balance the budget. And we're still in a hole after getting rid of all of the things that basically we need in order to be able to just survive in any type of somewhat comfortable manner. And it still doesn't do the trick. All the while looking at the budget, we can't even seem to conceive of the notion of looking at the giant $2 million house with the mortgage that we couldn't afford, or the big stupid boat that we bought that we hardly ever use. It just sits there collecting rust. And don't even get me started on mom's excessive drinking or dad's habitual gambling. We can't talk about these biggest items that suck up all of the money. God forbid we talk about those things. Those things are off the table. We get rid of everything else first. The whole framing around this whole discussion is completely nonsensical. When you don't look at the biggest ticket items that are in the budget and all the toys that are being bought that we don't need, instead of nickel and diming all the little stuff that just makes people's lives a little bit more comfortable so they're not in constant agony and they're not in constant misery, then you're not having a serious conversation. But those are the negotiations that are attached to this debt ceiling, but not the debt ceiling itself. If you want to have those conversations, though, about what to cut, when to cut it, all that stuff, that's budgeting conversations. Those are things that Congress is supposed to do. Have those conversations, but do it aside from the issue of whether or not you're going to pay for stuff that you already bought. That is not how it's supposed to work. Imagine, again, let's go back to the family analogy. Imagine you buy a whole bunch of stuff and you spend a whole bunch of money, and then when the bill comes due, you say, I can't pay you back the money I already spent on that stuff because that amount that I owe you, it's over the personal debt limit I set for myself. I set myself a debt ceiling, and the amount that I now owe you, that's over that debt limit, so I'm not going to pay you back. You just try that. Just try that with one of your bills and just see how that goes. Let me know how that conversation ends. Now, on this channel, I try to focus primarily on crime and criminal justice related matters. That is the primary focus, but I also expand out to other things that are related, like helping to interpret the law and how it's applied and how it impacts our lives, calling out things that are harmful and ridiculous in relation to the law, what I've termed BS. Yes, it means exactly what you think it means. Or spotlighting injustices where people are being harmed by things that are happening, specifically government actions or business actions that are they're being harmed by things that are of no fault of their own. Those are things that I would particularly feel are important to spotlight when talking about justice. And there's certainly a lot of injustice here. There's a lot of harm to come. People are going to lose a lot of money. They're going to lose their security. They're going to lose jobs. They're going to lose their ability to pay for basic needs. Everything gets more expensive to borrow. Our future is put in jeopardy. All of those things where people are suffering when they have no say in this matter. The people that are negotiating this aren't going to suffer, as though just regular average people that are going to suffer.
We have won! So how much did we get? Well, we didn't get everything that we wanted, but we negotiated hard and we got these coupons to Bennigan's and free bubblegum.
All of that is a grave injustice that's worth spotlighting. Not to mention when all of this discussion about whether or not we're going to pay the bills that have already been run up, all the things that we're not talking about, all of the problems that we have that we're not discussing throughout this entire thing, the oxygen that gets sucked up in the room by this debt ceiling nonsense is just mind-boggling. And it's completely insane how much doesn't get discussed because they're too busy talking about nonsense. They're too busy talking about something that's completely made up. Because every single thing I've said so far about the money and the budget and the negotiations is all completely irrelevant. It's beside the point. Because this conversation is one that shouldn't even be happening in the first place. Now, why is that? Well, I'll tell you in a moment after I just take a second to ask you to please hit the like button so this video could get shared more with other people. I would really appreciate it. It really helps out a lot. Thank you so much. Now, why? Because we need to pay the bills. That's it. It's that simple. You pay the bills. Just do it. Completely ignore the debt ceiling. Doesn't matter. Pay the bills. Now, why do I say that? When all of this discussion is happening and it's very, very serious in the matter of the framing all these negotiations, why would I just say that, like, just completely ignore it? It's completely irrelevant, shouldn't even be discussed. Here's why. Because the idea of the debt ceiling itself violates the highest law in the land, the law that supersedes any law that has ever or will ever be passed by Congress alone, the United States Constitution, and specifically the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. Now, when I first heard about the 14th Amendment in relation to this debate about the debt ceiling, I was skeptical about it. I kind of dismissed it just immediately in my head, not being too familiar with all the provisions, just mostly being familiar with the beginning parts, the first parts of the 14th Amendment. And I said to myself, that's a bit of a stretch. Trying to make a due process or equal protection justification for paying the debt, that doesn't seem to be quite right to me. But then I went to go read the amendment, the text of the amendment itself. And here's what it says. The validity of the public debt of the United States, authorized by law, shall not be questioned. Simple. Period. End of story. Now, I shortened it a little bit, but the part I took out is in addition to what this includes, not an exclusion. This is what it is. Pretty simple, straightforward language. It's about as clear and as straightforward as you can get. It's about as simple as a declarative statement as there is that's written into law. Now, you need to do some real gymnastics to try to contort a different interpretation out of this very, very straightforward, simple statement in the Constitution. I have no doubt that there are going to be people that are going to try and make that legal ease mumbo jumbo like explanation to try and justify what they want instead of what the text actually says. But just read it and look at it simple, straight, plain. Ignore all of the legalese and all the stuff that people are trying to throw on there and just read it for yourself. I've heard a lot of reasons why this is not a good idea to try and point to or use the 14th Amendment as justification for ignoring the debt ceiling. And really, none of those reasons have made a whole lot of sense to me. They haven't really held water. Here's some of them. It would undermine the creditworthiness of the United States, the reputation of the United States, the creditworthiness. What do you think a default's going to do? That undermines the credibility, the creditworthiness of the United States as big a way it possibly could. It would harm the economy. Yeah, and what do you think defaulting on the debt's going to do? It's going to have as big an impact on the economy as anything possibly could. So those don't really make a whole lot of sense. Another is that it's going to be challenged legally. There's going to be legal challenges to doing this. What isn't? What doesn't have legal challenges? Everything's challenged. That's not a reason to try and reinterpret the Constitution in a different way other than what it actually says. There's always going to be legal challenges. You work through those. But a lot of the reasoning behind not doing it, it centers on, well, I'm not legally convinced of that, or that's kind of legally dubious. What I haven't seen, aside from those blanket assertions of, well, that's maybe legally dubious or maybe legally fraught, there's no actual reasoning there. Legal reasoning that's actually given. It's just, I'm not convinced of the legality, which is not a very strong legal argument. Just saying, I'm not convinced of the legality doesn't cut it, especially when you can plainly read the text and it's very, very clear. And aside from all of that, when you're trying to actually apply the law and execute the laws written, you don't wait for permission from some other body to do that. You don't wait for the go-ahead from a court when you're trying to execute and apply the law. The role of the executive is to execute the laws. They may end up getting things wrong, and the courts maybe have to redirect them, but that happens at a later time. You don't get pre-authorization from the court every single time you did something. Imagine that, how that would render the executive completely immovable, completely unable to do anything. Imagine a police officer wanting to pull somebody over, but they're like, I don't know if I have a legally justified stop here. I better go to court in order to determine whether or not I should pull this person over every single time they're going to. No, they make the best decision that they can based on their understanding of what the law says. They don't go to the court every single time they need to make a decision. They deal with the legality of it if they might have made a mistake after the fact. Of course, this all assumes that they're acting in good faith. Acting in bad faith, that's a whole nother matter. But even acting in good faith, you could get things wrong. You still apply the law and execute it in that moment without having to get a permission ahead of time from a court. And you know what's not going to happen while those legal challenges are being litigated? We're not going to default. The economy's not going to crash. We're all not going to suffer in just absolute misery as a result of that, with regular people like you and me suffering the consequences. Those things won't happen while those legal challenges are being worked through. The fear of what might happen later with interpretations is not a good reason to not follow the plain text of what you're reading there in the Constitution. A lot of the reasoning also seems to center around, well, we've never done this before, which is not by itself a good reason not to do something. Just because it hasn't been done before doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. It just means it hasn't been done before. That's all it means. And a lot of the objections come from the people that are most against doing this, frankly, just don't want to lose their bargaining chips in being able to extract concessions from these debt ceiling fights. We can't do that because it shows that we can't come and work together in a bipartisan manner. Okay. We're supposed to ignore the law to promote a theater of negotiating to come to an agreed upon outcome in order to promote that farce, that farcical theater.
Yeah, we did it! Celebrate, everyone!
Wait just a second! We just did some calculating. Lost $10.4 million.
our Bennigan's coupons and bubblegum is worth roughly $3,008. Don't look at that. Come on, Fudge, let's dance. You had no idea what you were doing, and now you're trying to make it look like you won so that we won't set you adrift.
There's just these kind of arguments are made by people who are completely in their own little bubble, addicted to this political theater, so they can try to use this as their own little bargaining chip to try and get stuff that they want, as opposed to doing it in the regular budgeting process. They try to get stuff they can't get there by trying to use the debt ceiling to try to extract those concessions, which again is not a good reason. Not a good reason to not follow the plain text of the Constitution, and not a good reason to risk all of us having to suffer the consequences as a result. So none of these reasonings really just make any sense to me. So ignore all the theater, all the nonsense, just strip it all away and think about it for yourself. Does the plain text of the amendment make sense to you in the way it does to me? And is all of this surrounding it just completely irrelevant? Does it make sense to you? Am I misinterpreting something here you think I am? Is there something that I'm missing? Please, by all means, let me know. I would love to hear it. Let me know in the comments below. But one thing is for sure, we should not assume that these are all just good faith actors trying to make the best possible decision they can for the good of the nation by risking a default. Again, try to do any of this crap with your own budget, your own bills, and see where it goes, see how far it gets you. The bottom line is, ignore the debt ceiling. It's fake, it's made up. It's not real. Pay the bills. Those are real. Consequences of not paying them, those are real. Pay the bills.